All right, class, this is my final presentation titled Seeking the Origin of UFOs, Aliens, Free Energy, or Both, through Project Blue Book, Roswell and the Tic Tac case, the UAP congressional hearings, Bob Lazar and anti-gravity propulsion, free energy theory, Nikola Tesla, and the connection to the Great Pyramids. And I'll preface this presentation by saying I have a 25-page paper version of this, and after years of falling down the UFO rabbit hole and consuming hundreds of hours of podcasts and documentaries, I've broken down this extensive search for truth into its most essential parts. So with that being said, here's 15 minutes on the most delicious crumbs of the UFO phenomenon, which I'll convince you that UFOs are 100% real, and they defy our current understanding of physics and technology, and ultimately let you hypothesize for yourself whether they're indicative of alien visitors, suppressed free energy technology, or both. And before getting into the outline of the presentation and the nitty-gritty of all the topics I just mentioned in the subheading, I feel it's important to share the moment that sparked my fascination with this subject matter, and that was a few years ago. I had a chance conversation with my professor at Johns Hopkins, and she told me that she believes in UFOs and aliens because her brother is in the Air Force, and the common belief in the Air Force was that UFOs are real and aliens have been monitoring us for quite some time. And the reason I'm relaying this is because I realize it just takes one credible voice to pierce the veil of skepticism about UFOs, and once you actually begin examining the evidence, the depth and breadth of documentation makes it impossible to return to comfortable disbelief. And so this presentation traces my journey down this fascinating mystery and invites you all to come down this rabbit hole with me and examine the most compelling evidence that transformed my own understanding of what might be possible. And so here is the outline of my part one. In establishing the reality of UFOs, we must examine a comprehensive body of evidence spanning over 7 decades, beginning with the government's systematic investigation through Project Blue Book and continuing through pivotal cases like Roswell and the 2004 Tic Tac incident, and then culminating in the recent congressional hearings. A clear pattern emerges of craft demonstrating capabilities far beyond known human technology. And this section will methodically demonstrate not only that UFOs are unambiguously real, but that they exhibit technological capabilities that transcend our current understanding of aerodynamics, propulsion systems, and potentially physics itself. And here's an outline of the second part, which is all about free energy suppression. This section is going to explore the interconnected web of evidence that suggests free energy technology has been repeatedly discovered and systematically suppressed throughout history, from Nikola Tesla's mysterious connection to the Great Pyramids and his thwarted attempts to provide wireless energy to the world, to the suspicious deaths of modern inventors like Stanley Meyer and his water-powered fuel cell. A pattern emerges of technological breakthroughs being buried. And so the Great Pyramids, alongside other megalithic mysteries and new geological findings, are beginning to suggest what many have theorized as the existence of an ancient, advanced, lost human civilization whose technological achievements may have surpassed our own. And when viewed alongside the classified UFO programs, a haunting possibility emerges, and that is that humanity may have lost a century of technological and spiritual advancement due to the deliberate suppression of transformative energy technologies. So to begin, the transformation of UFO discourse from fringe conspiracy to mainstream scientific inquiry represents probably the most remarkable shift in public discourse of the 21st century and potentially of all time. This paradigm shift was catalyzed by a 2017 New York Times article that revealed the Pentagon's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, and this was followed by the release of authenticated military footage. And to me, that just shows the power of the media in our collective search for truth. This New York Times article was really the catalyst. And so of all the media I've come across, the most succinct quote I've heard that describes this shift is by a world-renowned theoretical physicist and UFO enthusiast, Mikio Kaku, who said on his podcast, "It used to be that one person would see something in the sky and say, look, there's something up there. But now things have changed. We have multiple sightings by multiple modes. That's the gold standard of looking for these objects. Not just one person, but several reputable people. Not just radar, but visual sighting, infrared sensors, telescopic evidence. The burden of proof has shifted. The burden of proof used to be on the people who believed in UFOs, but now the burden of proof has shifted to the Pentagon and the military for them to prove that these are not extraterrestrial." And so there's been a sea change in the last several years. 50 years ago, there was a congressional hearing from Project Blue Book, and there was a lot of laughter. But we now have frame-by-frame analysis of these objects traveling 20 times the speed of sound, zigzagging, dropping 70,000 feet in 1 second, and they can go underwater and also move without any visible means of propulsion. So now, Project Blue Book is an important starting point as well because it establishes the historical credibility of UFO investigations through official government documentation of 701 unexplained cases out of the over 12,000 sightings in the 22 years Blue Book was active from 1947 to 1969. So if you get nothing else from this presentation, focus on that bolded number in the top right, which some UFO fanatics like Jeremy Corbell have literally gotten tattooed on their body. And of all the insane UFO facts I've learned, it might be the fact that U.S. government tracked over 700 UFO sightings in just 2 decades that might take the cake. And while there's a trove of marquee cases that occurred during Blue Book, like the 1952 DC sighting, 1965 Tinker Air Force Oklahoma sighting, the 1966 Ann Arbor and Ellsworth Air Force Base sightings, I simply don't have the time to get into all these cases, so I'm just directing you to that magical 701 number. And the other thing I could not talk about Project Blue Book without mentioning is the estimate of the situation document. This document, which reportedly concluded in 1948 that some UFOs were of extraterrestrial origin, according to Captain Edward Ruppelt, who was literally the director of Project Blue Book at the time, this document was destroyed and rejected by higher-ranking officials. And so after all my time researching Project Blue Book, it is this fact that the director of the program has claimed this document concluded UFOs were extraterrestrial, and it was subsequently destroyed. That was probably the most startling finding. And here's just a quick timeline of Project Blue Book. It transformed from Project Sign to Grudge to Blue Book, and it ultimately ended in 1969 with the controversial Condon Report. And this report was controversial mainly due to this quote right here by the document's author. The report stated there's nothing of scientific value in UFO studies, but this apparent bias and clear predetermination of results, coupled with Blue Book's often criticized explanations for UFO sightings, has fueled suspicions of a government cover-up. And ultimately, while Blue Book may have purportedly closed the door on UFO investigations, it opened a new chapter in our collective quest to understand the unknown and realize that the debate isn't whether UFOs are real, the debate is what are they. So now, the Roswell incident of 1947 is probably the most notorious UFO case in all of American history, and it's considered the event that thrust UFOs into American public consciousness, and was also not so coincidentally the year that Project Blue Book started. On July 8th, 1947, the Roswell Army Airfield issued a press release stating they had recovered a flying disc, which was later retracted and identified as a weather balloon as a part of Project Mogul. And the incident was largely forgotten about for 30 years until 1978, when Colonel Jesse Marcel, who was the first military officer to investigate the crash, claimed that debris was actually of extraterrestrial origin. But this case, alongside Kenneth Arnold's famous sighting on June 22nd, where he reported seeing 9 crescent objects flying at incredible speeds, these 2 cases together marks the beginning of modern UFO culture in the United States, and they are the 2 events that ultimately catalyzed Project Blue Book, and as the Air Force began to officially study them. Now, let's transition from the most famous historical cases from the 40s to the current day synopsis of the phenomenon after these whistleblowers made some bombshell revelations under oath in Congress last summer. These photos are the key figures. Starting from left to right, we have David Fravor, the decorated Navy pilot who brought massive attention to the now famous Tic Tac 2004 UFO, which I'll debrief in the next slide. Ryan Graves, another F-18 pilot, revealed the regularity of UAP sightings. Chris Mellons, a former Deputy Assistant Secretary who facilitated the release of now declassified UAP footage. David Grush, a former intelligence official turned whistleblower, delivered probably the most explosive testimony, which I'll get into in one second. Lou Elizondo was the director of the Pentagon's UFO program. He resigned in protest over excessive secrecy. And then Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp are investigative filmmakers and journalists who are also a part of the hearings. So, most significantly, David Grush, former member of the Pentagon's UAP task force, literally claimed that there is a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program, and that non-human biologics have been recovered by the United States. He also said that he's been denied access to some government UFO programs, but he knows the exact locations of UAPs in U.S. possession. And then equally compelling, Ryan Graves spoke to the regularity of these encounters, stating that these sightings are routine. UAPs are grossly underreported. Military aircrew, commercial pilots, and trained observers whose lives depend upon accurate identification are frequently witnessing this phenomenon. Soon these encounters became so frequent that aircrew would discuss the risk of UAP as a part of their regular pre-flight briefs. So if you take away one thing from this entire presentation, let it be that government intelligence officials have literally admitted under oath in Congress that the U.S. government is in possession of UAPs. They have a secret crash retrieval and back engineering program, and they've literally recovered aliens before in the words of non-human biologics. And so, as I said, David Fravor brought immense media coverage to the Tic Tac case, which I labeled the most indisputable case in modern history. and this was when 4 Navy pilots visibly saw a UFO that was recorded by multiple sensors traveling 70,000 feet in a single second. They said it was bouncing around like a ping pong ball with no visible means of propulsion. And when Fravor recounted this incident on 60 Minutes, stating, "I don't think we developed it on this planet." It carried special weight coming from a highly decorated Navy pilot. And this incident's multiple expert witnesses and various sensor data make it virtually impossible to dismiss through conventional explanations. And now, with these bombshell revelations in mind, I wanted to just mention some of the most compelling evidence of encounters of the third kind. That means cases that involve direct contact with alleged non-human entities. While such claims of alien encounters were once dismissed as outlandish, Rush's sworn testimony about recovered non-human biologics forces us to reevaluate these historical cases with fresh eyes. We have the 1994 aerial school incident in Zimbabwe, the 1996 Virginia, Brazil incident, and the abduction cases of Betty and Barney Hill, as well as Travis Walton. And I've written essays on each of these cases. I could probably speak about them each for 10 minutes, but for now, I'll just say they're all very compelling documentaries on each of these cases that I implore you all to go watch. And lastly, in part one, we have the Bob Lazar story. So in 1989, Bob Lazar claimed that he worked at a classified facility called S4 near Area 51, where he was tasked with reverse engineering UFO propulsion systems that utilized an element not yet discovered, element 115, Moscavian, which actually was not added to the elemental chart until 2004, about 15 years after he mentioned it. And when Lazar first came forward, his claims about a highly compartmentalized reverse engineering program at Area 51 seemed quite far-fetched, but with Grush's testimony in mind about multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering programs, this has transformed Lazar's account from seemingly outlandish to eerily prescient. And Lazar said the craft's ability to manipulate gravity suggests a form of free energy and a fundamental breakthrough in physics that would render current energy systems obsolete. So that paves the natural transition to part two about Nikola Tesla's suppressed free energy ambitions.